All right, good morning. Welcome back. I'm Abby Groff-Blazak. I'm the Director of the Office of Educator Talent at the Michigan Department of Education. And I'm also lucky to be leading the action team that is helping us to co-construct the plan around educator quality in ESSA. So primarily focused on Title II, but certainly conversations related to programming throughout the other areas of the Title programs as well. And trying to, as with the rest of the approach to the state plan, looking at it holistically. Allison wanted me to remind you, pink cards for this session, so please feel free to be writing questions as I'm talking, and there ought to be plenty of time near the end to answer your questions. And I do apologize up front, my throat's a little raspy. I'm at like the week 2.5 end of a cold, so I've been promised a swift rescue in case I start coughing by Vanessa. She's seen this many times and can step in for me. So I want to start out by talking a little bit about just kind of the process that our group has been through, and really just to kind of brag on the action team a little bit. So we got together back in late May, early June, an exceptional group of 40 stakeholders representing every group you could imagine. We were very fortunate to have 5 or 6 classroom teachers who could join us over the summer and then virtually into the early fall. And where we started where Vanessa mentioned this morning, where we wanted to start with the state plan overall. So taking a look at Michigan's Top 10 in 10 strategic plan, as well as the actual language of the Every Student Succeeds Act. As we continued to work through the process over the next few months, we wove in a number of other additional foundational documents, and I've noted that kind of the most important ones up here. And we weren't able to front load all of these based on the timeline. If you participated in the early first stakeholder feedback process, that fell just like less than a month into our work together. And so the early focus areas that are named up here were really a result just of taking a look at the top 10 in 10 and ESSA itself, specifically Title II state and local activities. As we moved through the identification of our early focus areas through the stakeholder feedback process, we also wove in Michigan's plan to ensure equitable access to excellent educators, which is also known in brief as Michigan's State Equity Plan. The work that the Michigan Department of Education has been doing with the Center for Great Teachers and Leaders with their talent development framework, which is a really well-researched, well-documented, and supportive tool for state agencies to use in terms of taking a holistic look and approach to best ideas in terms of policy interventions around educator workforce. And then other ESSA language and guidance as that became available. So the guidance around evidence-based, for example, became available, and we looped that in. The guidance around the non-regulatory guidance around Title II became available, and we looped that in as well. And then just to note, again, that the early focus areas that we discussed in our early concept paper were equity, recruitment and retention, evaluation, and career pathways for teachers, as where we thought we wanted to go in terms of educator quality priorities that aligned with the top 10 in 10 through our state plan. So we took a look as we continued to work with those foundational documents, as well as looping in the stakeholder feedback from that first round and the first process. And the group came back to where, as I've said before, almost all conversations in my experience around educator workforce issues tend to come back to. And we come back to these big ideas that we group into recruitment, preparation, professional learning, evaluation, leadership, and retention. And that's great because those are the big areas. Those are the big ideas when we're talking about educator workforce. But those are so big and so huge, and we, again, back to what Vanessa was saying this morning, we wanted a specific focus through ESSA to support our top 10 in 10 goals. And so from that point, we broke into smaller action planning teams, and we developed and workshopped ideas within these categories to kind of come to a set of recommendations from the action team to then flow up and down through the governance structure that's developing the state plan. And so I have used these slides before, and so I do notice some familiar faces in the room, and maybe you've seen them, and I hope that you'll notice some small changes, because as we continue to go through this process and we continue to work, say, internally with our cabinet and externally with stakeholders, there continue to be tweaks being made, even as we launch into the kind of this second formal round of feedback. So we are listening and incorporating those all the time. And where we landed and where we are right now that I'm going to talk about today are 4 overlapping priority areas with a focus throughout on equity. And I want to say right up front and acknowledge fully that I get the comment a lot, well, the devil's in the details, and that is absolutely true. These are big kind of overarching ideas, and our next step right now that we're just kind of getting ready to dive into is, okay, so if these are the priorities, then what are the details of implementation that would have to take place at the state agency level, at the regional level, at the local levels, and so forth. So there's certainly a lot more work to be done. But again, these are kind of the big main focus areas that we are looking for your feedback on. So first of all, cultivating a high-quality educator preparation provider and P12 partnerships. Secondly, establishing a system of supported transitions from pre-service to the profession. Third, developing and utilizing teacher leadership roles. And then fourth, establishing and supporting a pipeline of high potential, aspiring, and highly effective practicing principals. And as you may be familiar with, there is certainly a premium in ESSA and Entitled to this time around on building level leadership and providing supports for that. And so we certainly call that out here in this 4th priority area. So to talk about each of those a little bit more in depth and try to, again, call out where these are going to overlap, starting with the cultivation of our preparation provider and P12 partnerships. So we see this certainly as serving as the foundation for the next big area, the system of supported transitions into the profession. And we know, if you're familiar with educator preparation programs and the accreditation process, that there's a new set of accreditation standards out that are pushing and moving higher ed institutions and districts toward these partnership models. And we certainly want to capitalize on that. But we also recognize, and I'm sure that you do too, that a dialogue that you frequently hear when you're talking with prep providers and then you're talking with districts is teachers and leaders are not coming out of prep programs prepared for the realities of the classrooms and the schools that they're facing. And then you hear, what are you talking about? We're doing exactly what you tell us you need, right? So there certainly continues to be a disconnect there. And so what we're looking to pursue and what we're looking to do here, in addition to kind of feeding into the other focus areas, which I'll get into in just a minute, is to be able to open up the lines of dialogue so that we are not running into sort of this false dichotomy that's out there. That prep programs are really listening to and aware of because they are in schools and they can see what the needs are, and districts feel that they have a voice in shaping preparation programs as well to produce educators that are prepared and are ready for the realities of classrooms and buildings and districts when they come out of their preparation programs. And I do want to note here that you've probably heard us use the phrase educator preparation institutions in the past, and we are deliberately making a shift to educator preparation providers or educator preparation programs here to be a more inclusive term and more inclusive of preparation programs that fall outside our traditional colleges of education, which is not a value judgment on either one, and I'll open that up in a later slide, but just want to kind of put a pin in that and note that as well. So when we're talking about these partnerships and what the focus on equity is within this area, we'll be looking to develop highly specialized programs to meet partnership district workforce needs. So this is again related to the partnership district concept in which we will play a more intensive role in terms of cultivating partnerships with preparation program providers to meet specific partnership district workforce needs. Secondly, establishing a system of supported transitions from pre-service to the profession. This is another sort of more inclusive term that we're migrating towards. Previously, I think we've typically just referred to induction and mentoring. But we are particularly interested in this space of transition from the latter part of preparation to the early part of professional placements, and that there's significant overlap in there, and that there's a learning continuum that continues after certification is granted. And we see 3 big areas of work within this idea of supported transitions. The first being residency preparation programs. That is specifically called out in the top 10 in 10. You may have heard it referred to before as, say, the medical model, but the idea that pre-certification our candidates are spending an extended amount of time, up to a full year, in a classroom with a mentor teacher with a very highly skilled, highly effective teacher, learning the craft and learning to teach side by side, again, prior to certification. We know that that's a huge shift, and that, yes, absolutely would be a huge expense if we were to impose that universally, right? But it's an area of work that we want to start small and see where we go and see what happens. I think that there's a lot of opportunities within there. Secondly, targeted alternate route preparation programs. And I'll just flag this and say this is probably the most controversial piece in here. And I totally welcome questions and comments about that, and we had very lively conversation within our action team about it as well. What we're talking about here, again, I want to put the emphasis on the word targeted. That alternate route programs that we're talking about here are targeted to meet specific workforce needs. And that the best alternate route preparation programs are residency preparation programs. That while the pre-service preparation is certainly truncated for alternate routes, in these types of alternate route preparation models, the induction and mentoring piece is actually much more extended than we see in traditional programs. So again, the emphasis being on developed and implemented in a targeted manner with an emphasis on residency and ongoing mentoring in the early years of job placement. And then third, because those two buckets are actually really very small, we have a whole lot more educators that need support from the latter years, again, of preparation to the early years of the profession. And so really taking a look at creating more robust and high quality induction and mentoring programs for all teachers and leaders who are new to the profession. The equity focus here being investing resources in high quality alternate route preparation programs to meet significant and urgent workforce needs, again, in partnership districts or hard to staff districts, which may or may not be partnership districts. And of course, one of the most frequently heard comments, certainly not just limited to this presentation, but I think that we've all heard before, is how can it be equity to provide less prepared teachers for kids who need it most, right? And so kind of the counter argument to that is that where there are real and urgent workforce needs and there's nobody to be in there's no one in a classroom, I think it's better for us to focus on getting someone who's less than 100% prepared and then continuing to support them while they're in there via these residency type preparation models than to say we just don't have anyone to staff that classroom, right? We've all seen the effects, maybe we haven't. I've certainly seen the effects in my experience of not having a teacher in a classroom or cycling through multiple teachers because you're not bringing in someone who's certified, and just the detriment and the lack and loss of learning that occurs within that classroom for those students. Third, developing and utilizing teacher leadership roles. This one has got a lot of energy certainly out in the field, and we've got a number of kind of grassroots organizations popping up that are really exciting around the state. From those that are focusing on national board certification to those that are just kind of getting together and saying, hey, we have common interests around teacher leadership in a specific content area. And so in this area particularly, the desire of the state agency is really to kind of follow the lead and support and amplify the efforts that are going, and really take advantage of the grassroots movements to amplify teacher leadership voices into something that receives more attention, more resources at the state level. So we certainly want to focus on helping to establish building level distributed leadership models that provide teachers with career growth opportunities and expand building supports for professional learning, supported transition, and instructional leadership, right? So certainly we want principals to be instructional leaders, but we also know that the capacity of one person can be quite limited. And in a distributed leadership model, we have additional capacity of highly skilled educators who are there to help and step in and take on roles such as mentor teachers, such as providers of professional learning for other teachers, for informal observations and feedback with fellow teachers as well. So many opportunities, but we're also noting here that that requires some very specific planning and support to make models like that work. And secondly, we also see value in establishing regional and state level leadership roles to expand, again, the reach of highly effective teacher leaders, and to elevate teacher voice to help influence education policy. So there's certainly kind of the day-to-day craft of teaching and leading that teacher leaders support at building and district levels. But we also recognize the value of teacher voice and increasing teacher voice in these conversations that we have, say, right now, around what are we doing as a state with this great big federal education law. So our focus here, and this is true across as well, but just want to call it out specifically, that at the state level, we certainly want to concentrate resources for teacher leadership development, so supports for developing distributed leadership models, say, or even specific teacher leadership trainings to high-need schools, so the Tier 2, Tier 3, comprehensive, targeted, whichever label we end up kind of applying to them. And pointing out here, too, that this is a good example of where the details have yet to be worked out. Because as we're kind of creating the educator quality focus areas, and Paula and Karen just talked to you about supports for schools, as we co-create, we also have to braid. And so exactly what that looks like, again, the details are continuing to come. And finally, establishing and supporting a pipeline of high potential, aspiring, and highly effective practicing principals. And this kind of takes a look at, although you've seen, I think, in the other focus areas, I tend to use the term educators or teachers and leaders. Leaders are recognized through all of those other focus areas as well as playing a role. But again, we support the specialized focus through ESSA on the importance of building leadership. And the importance of building leadership on building teacher capacity and increasing student learning. And so in terms of talking about a pipeline of highly effective principals, we want to look at developing high quality methods of identification and recruitment of high potential candidates. So rather than relying typically on kind of the self-selection into that profession, developing tools and resources to help people identify and encourage, again, those that show good potential for that type of leadership role to consider exploring that avenue. Developing and supporting high quality principal preparation pathways. Again, that inclusive term EPP rather than Educator Preparation Institution. These could be context specific, but again, being strategic through partnerships about what local needs are and how preparation should reflect that. Ensuring high quality clinical preparation experiences and supported transitions for new principals too, just kind of reiterating that supported transition slides, but for principals and echoing that it's just as important that pre-service for principals includes time in buildings and being able to practice alongside effective practitioners, as well as ongoing support in their early years in a principalship. And then through our conversations around professional learning, and specifically professional learning for principals, there are two big areas of professional learning that we heard over and over again we need to highlight and beef up for all principals, not just new principals. But one, I mentioned on the last slide, is making sure that principals are prepared to develop and support distributed leadership models so that they can appropriately and successfully utilize teacher leaders within their schools. And secondly, the ongoing need for principals to continue to develop skills related to the implementation of educator evaluations. That this year, certainly if they haven't already, they should be getting kind of the basic skills and how to use adopted tools. But again, continuing to learn and develop the skills of recognizing effective teaching, having critical conversations with teachers around that, incorporating data into the conversations as well. And again, just to note, the equity focus is also the concentration of resources, again, at the state level for those schools that need it most. Just a few notes on this equity thread that we're pulling through the educator quality piece. I do want to note that we're working to develop a more robust and meaningful measure of educator workforce shortages in Michigan. We don't have a great singular answer to identifying what the shortages are right now. We produce a couple of lists related to retirees and to federal loan forgiveness programs, and you'll probably notice that even those two don't match up. So we are kind of puzzling through the different ways that we can get at this, because we do know that there are very real shortages in terms of both content areas and specific place-based or geographic locations, and we want to treat it that way. And this is so important because when we are able to identify the shortages, we can better target resources to meet needs that exist, right? Rather than just kind of tossing it out there and saying, this is to meet shortage needs, but having a very clear idea of what those are. I mentioned up front that one of the foundational documents that we used was the State Equity Plan, or the long name, Michigan's State Plan to Ensure Equitable Access to Effective Educators. Although this has not shown up, to my knowledge, I haven't read the latest guidance that just came out. They have not been very specific or said that we have to redo the equity plan as part of this round, but there are certainly hints at it. And it continues to be highlighted through both Title I and Title II of ESSA. And it's a good opportunity for us as well, because if you're familiar with our state equity plan back from 2015, it was essentially a plan to plan. And we've got some more specific strategies to tie to that now. Also related to that is that the partnership districts and the partnership district model can play a role in terms of us being able to coordinate and streamline resources, in that the equity plan initially offered us the opportunity to focus that plan, that strategy, and any resources that may at some time have become available to support them on a subset of districts. We chose not to, again, because it was a more general plan for us at the time. But we have had significant conversation around focusing the equity plan strategies on these partnership districts as well. Again, allowing us to just kind of consolidate and focus as many resources as we have at our disposal on this partnership district idea. And the last thing that I'll talk about is related to the Title II Part A funding. So sort of the traditional standard breakdown of funding is that a great big pot of money is sent from the feds to the state. Of that, 95% is then subgranted to LEAs on a formula basis from the state agency. 5% is withheld by the state agency, 1% for administration of the grants, which essentially means just all the fun compliance activities and oversight. And then 4% for state activities, which can take many different forms, and they have in the past, from specific state level programs that are offered to additional competitive or formula grant programs, again, back out to LEAs, but meant to be tied to state priorities. ESSA offers the opportunity for states, and right now we are putting out for comment that Michigan will choose to pursue an additional 3% set aside specifically to support the school leader activities. And so you'll notice that these percentages don't quite line up with the percentages I just said, and that's because the small detail there is that it's actually 3% of the 95%, which breaks down to this. So what we plan to do in terms, again, of Title II Part A funding is that 92.15% of the total allocation to Michigan will be distributed via subgrants to LEAs, 1% for grants administration, 4% for state activities, and then 2.85% of that total bucket for state activities specifically to support leadership. Okay. So I believe, yes, that is my last slide today. So I am more than happy to entertain any questions that you have on your pink note cards. Sure. All right, so I'm looking up here to see if neither Paula nor Fred are still in the room. Fred. Oh, Fred, great. So I think there's another, is there another microphone up here for Fred too? Right here, okay. Because Fred, I'm gonna ask you to pop in on some of these. Because some of the questions that are coming in are related specifically to funding and how funding flows, and that's Fred's area of expertise. So Fred, first question is, how will the funds be sent to the districts? And how will oversight take place?
The title. Use the mic on the stand. The formula for Title II going to the districts will not change. It still will be in the consolidated app in MEGS. And that will be, projections will be coming out soon. And there is a new formula. So the process is the same, but the formula, watch for a communique that'll come out early January, and it'll explain differences for your building, or your district, I mean.
And so I think this question's related. Will Title II be included in the application?
Yes, as always.
Yes. And then the last question on this card, will evidence-based practices be given by MDE? Again, I want to say that this kind of echoes, I think, the answer that was given in the last session, that we are certainly working to support that, and that where evidence-based practices kind of come in here in terms of the plan approval process is that those that demonstrate certain levels will have sort of a quicker, streamlined approval process than others who take a more experimental approach to evidence-based, based again on that non-regulatory guidance from US Ed. So what is being done to allow more flexibility for schools to select teaching staff who do not have teaching certificates but fill the needs of school grade, as opposed to having to hire in a person with a teaching certificate who may not be a good fit because or lack of competency? So as you know, the highly qualified requirement from No Child Left Behind was removed in ESSA, and it was left to states to decide what takes its place, essentially. And so there's been kind of a separate concurrent group that's been working on what we're calling appropriate placement, which I think gets at this. And part of that is taking a look at the certificate structures that we have, who holds what certificates and where they can be placed. I will tell you that nothing has been determined conclusively. I'm not sure, maybe if I can get some nods if any of you participated in a recent survey related to the appropriate placement work. Maybe not. All right. We'll certainly be coming out with some updates around that. I think one thing that I've certainly been very vocal about, and one thing that we talked about in our action team as well when we're talking about this, is that wherever we land, there needs certainly to be some flexibility built in. And that is particularly true, I think, where we're talking in situations about, a person holds a credential, but the hiring agency or the hiring person, who's the principal or the HR department, can identify that this is not the person for the job. And this is the person for the job, and they don't hold the credential, right? So where we land, I feel very optimistic, again, about there being some flexibility built in there. But please continue to stay tuned, and we'll continue to update you as the appropriate placement work continues.
While Abby's looking through those, there was a question, can Title II continue to be used for reduced class size? According to ESSA, you can use your Title II funds to level class sizes. So class size reduction, as you know it, will be gone. But you'll be able to use Title IIA funds for leveling class size. And hopefully there will be some parameters set around that.
All right. Question, how do paraprofessionals fit into your plans for Title II? So you notice that we didn't specifically name paraprofessionals in those slides. However, our approach right now is that when we use the term educators, again, that's an inclusive term that includes teachers, leaders, and paraprofessionals. So as we're working through the details, again, specifically related to the state activities, we'll have some additional information about supports for paraprofessionals. Locals, however, again, Fred just mentioned allowable activities for local districts, and certainly there are a number of activities that are allowable in terms of supporting paraprofessional hiring and development, again, within local districts. All right, so what does cultural competency training look like? And would there be any training on identifying and supporting youth in our special populations for general education teachers, administration, and staff. So again, what I'll say is that at the state level and related to state activities, I don't have a specific answer for you right now. I can say, though, that this is also an intersection question related to evidence-based practices and locals' ability to determine locally what types of professional learning activities related to the comprehensive needs assessment that you identify within your district. So certainly, cultural competency training can be funded with Title II dollars, as well as training for teachers of general education to better support special populations. And those are decisions that are made locally.
This kind of goes with that about counselors.
Okay. What supports are in place for support staff, such as guidance counselors, to foster growth in leadership? So I'm a little unclear about what's being asked here. Is this like for school counselors leading into leadership roles?
Yes.
Yes. So guidance counselors moving into a principalship, say? Yes, great. So would certainly see this work as happening within that building a pipeline of aspiring principals. If you have a guidance counselor or a teacher or any other staff who has expressed interest, that there are certain activities and certain supports built in even prior to entering preparation programs to kind of get them ready, give them access, some early experiences perhaps, but again, the idea of specifically cultivating high potential candidates. What incentives will be provided to retain high quality educators in hard to staff districts? That's a great question. So again, you noticed in the slides that we didn't specifically name any retention incentives. And in our conversation, let me step back and say that there are certainly a number of policies that have either been tried or perhaps are promising in terms of retention incentives, and we don't discourage those. Kind of the long-term goal and where our conversations keep leading us is that all those one-time incentives aside, for example, say a salary incentive or a housing incentive, without really high quality everything else in place, that continues to be a very challenging thing to achieve, right? So if a teacher is in a place and they have a salary incentive and they have a housing incentive, but they aren't receiving high quality professional learning and they weren't adequately prepared for the classroom, and they aren't being evaluated properly, the incentive, those sort of like one-time incentives are not necessarily going to overcome the other barriers. And so true retention, sort of over time, is a result of doing these other things well.
This one's about evaluation.
Okay. Is the plan including methods to utilize evaluations to determine needed professional development for building staff and not implemented in a punitive manner? Yeah, so this is Michigan's educator evaluation system overall, even if we're not talking about ESSA. So certainly we acknowledge, and we're very forthright about the fact that, I think that the narrative around educator evaluations over recent years in Michigan, and not just in Michigan, is that they're a punitive tool meant to punish. The legislation and the law that we have in place that we're all working to implement right now really provides the support that we need to change that narrative. And that is that, of course, evaluation is meant to be a very impactful professional learning exercise, that the power of evaluation happens in the observation and the feedback and the process itself, and not in the final label. And so apart from, you saw us mentioning specifically ongoing professional learning for principals in doing this effectively, using ESSA resources to do that, yes, to build upon the pot of resources that we have at the state level to to continue to do that, because that's where we see the biggest impact being made, right? They're the ones who are doing the evaluations typically, the ones who are assigning the labels typically, and thus they need the most support to really help the system statewide make that transition from punitive exercise to professional learning activity. How do you reconcile the need to have high quality teacher prep with the desire to have alternative certification or prep? Alternative programs lend themselves towards convenience, not necessarily quality. Yeah, so that's a criticism that I've heard, certainly, and I'm sure that you've all heard it before as well. I'll kind of reiterate what I said earlier, in that I don't think that we can fairly put all traditional programs in the good preparation bucket and all alternative preparation programs in the not quality bucket, right? There are quality programs of both types. And what we want, the end goal is quality preparation that prepares teachers for classrooms. When we talk about supporting targeted alternative routes, we are talking about intensive partnerships with districts and program providers that clearly identifies what staffing needs are and where they both have a voice in the development of the programming that prepares those teachers. And again, that there is extended and intensive support for those early career teachers and even principals and alternate routes for principals to help them continue to cultivate their craft.
Right. And the last question has to do with English language learner shortage.
All right. We already know Michigan has a shortage of teachers that are highly qualified to teach our large and growing EL population. How can MDE prepare existing teachers to become highly qualified for this growing population? How can MDE beef up its certification to include courses to address English learners? I would love to kind of build out the answer to this question, I think, in our FAQ document and loop in our Office of Professional Preparation Services that gets much more into the details in terms of the content of preparation programs. And again, I referenced earlier the CAPE standards, the new accreditation standards for prep programs that are being introduced, and what's included and what's not included in there. But short of all the details that they can provide, what I will say is that's certainly part of the conversation in terms of making all teachers ready for the realities of the classrooms and the schools in which they're teaching, which is a phrase that I keep using, as well as taking a look at how we certify teachers now and how we place teachers now, and how that changes based on sort of the appropriate placement work, as well as, like I said, and this question references shortages and us getting a handle on what the shortages are, where the shortages are, and how we then create partnerships between higher ed and districts or preparation providers and districts to meet those needs, whether it be for brand new certified teachers or whether it be for already certified teachers who need to build additional skills to meet the needs of students.
I lied, there's one more.
All right.
Will MDE give districts and school boards more support in moving educators out that are not meeting the district guidelines?
So this is the other side of the educator evaluation question, right? So I guess I'm not sure what more support might look like there. We certainly aren't in a position necessarily to provide cover. What we can do is what we do is we help to provide clarification around what the requirements are of the law, what the requirements are not. I think I'll just leave the answer there, I suppose, and we'll take a look at some of the FAQs that we already have developed around the educator evaluations, as well as adding some more to this that might be helpful.